to the practitioner's experience and viewpoint. And for the motion, Forum Shah's going to speak. She's an experienced family solicitor, a senior associate at Dawson Cornwall, based in London. She qualified in 2014 and specialises in family law, in particular international child abduction. She's a committee member of the Child Abduction Lawyers Association and the Association of Lawyers for Children. Forum.
Thank you. Evening, everybody. So, as Mrs. Justice Tice just introduced me, I'm a solicitor at Dawson Cornwall, primarily focusing on international children cases. So, primarily international child abduction, so where a child has been removed away from their home state. So, a lot of my clients are based abroad. So I'm on team pro-remote hearings, so it's no surprise that I think remote hearings should play a significant part in our family justice system. So thinking back, reflecting back on to the onset of the pandemic, one of the things I recall as a practitioner was how quickly our family justice system adapted. It was almost on an overnight basis. And so prior to remote hearings, I have a lot of memories being in the corridors of East London Family Court or the Central Family Court or here with a client trying to take instructions in a whispered manner, then trying to find a space with my opponent to try and negotiate. And then there'd be also other times where I'd have to spend most of the day waiting around to go into court, making small talk with whoever was there. And all of that rapidly disappeared when remote hearings started back in March 2020. So initially, it's fair to say I was apprehensive about how remote hearings would work, and this was probably the biggest change I'd experienced as a practitioner. Also had not long come back to work from maternity leave. So it's fair to say I was worried about how I would adapt and how a remote hearing would work. But I have to give thanks to all of those involved in implementing the remote system. It may not have been perfect, there are glitches, but it certainly kept the justice system going. And this can be contrasted to other countries where court hearings just stopped overnight. So in terms of why I think remote hearings should continue to play a significant role, I just wanted to highlight a few points. So as mentioned at the beginning, I act for a lot of clients who live abroad, and I would like to say that in this day and age in our family justice system, there are a lot of cases where a party or a family member lives abroad and they need to participate in these court proceedings here. And so most of my clients I actually never meet face to face, so I'm used to working with clients remotely. And all of the work I have to do is on an intense basis to try and secure a child's return to their home country, and that's all undertaken remotely. And so prior to the pandemic, these clients would not participate in the remote hearings at all. They would, of course, be kept up to date by their legal team by being given a summary at the end of the hearing. And in those rare cases where somebody had to give evidence, we as a solicitor would have to find a video link suite in their home country, make an application to the legal aid agency for prior authority, then contact the court to arrange a test link, and then make sure the client knew where they were going. So there were a lot of cogs that needed to be turned. And inevitably, I won't bore you with the ins and outs of it, but there were many occasions when I was tearing my hair out and all of the stages would fall apart, and the look on the judge's face, there was nothing worse than that. So I'm pleased now to say that all of this has changed, and all we have to do now is send the court the client's email address. So this saves a lot of professional time and public funds, and it's also less stressful for the client because they can focus on the issues at hand. Where in a case where the stakes are so high, they don't have to worry about getting there on time, where they're going, or encountering another practical issue. So secondly, I'd also say that the pandemic has fundamentally changed people's working arrangements, meaning that people rarely, or not rarely, but people often do not work in the city that they live in. So in my firm, for example, I have colleagues that live in Cambridge and Basingstoke and even France. So if you insist on in-person hearings, then I think you're placing some members of the profession at a disadvantage, for example, solicitor advocates. There are also people who have adopted remote working as a means of being able to meet their own childcare commitments, and insisting on attended hearings would mean that these people would not be able to represent their clients at a hearing. And there is also the disadvantage to those who have mobility issues that make it harder for them to get to court. So in short, remote hearings should continue so that these people can practice And so if we want to have a diverse legal profession, then we need to ensure that anyone who wants to work within it is able to do so. Thirdly, some clients do not live anywhere near the court in which the proceedings are taking place. So, for example, I recently had a case where a client had to travel from Cornwall to London, and this was a 12-hour round trip for them and was really expensive. And aside for the cost of travel and their time, the client had to make extensive childcare arrangements. And obviously this is probably on the extreme end of examples, but as practice has broadened, I think it's quite rare for anyone to be able to get to court within 30 minutes, even in London. So the Central Family Court, for example, services a lot of areas, and I think we all know that the West London Family Court isn't that easy to get to by public transport. So I think a client would be less stressed if they had to travel on public transport during peak times. At the moment, as has been outlined, there are a lot of issues relating to public transport with the rail strikes. And so having a remote hearing would cut all this out and the focus could remain on the issues at hand. It's also quite difficult for young children to be left, particularly those who are being breastfed for a long period of time. So I know it's been said that remote hearings require a party to have access to the internet or a device to use to connect to the link, and I fully recognise that it may not be possible for everyone to have access to Wi-Fi or a mobile connection. However, for those that do not, it's my experience that arrangements can be made when this issue is identified. So for example, people can attend at their solicitor's office to connect to the hearing, which would also have the added advantage of being near their legal representative. In a case before, I've had experience of a local authority making arrangements for parties to access technology. I know it's also said that internet connection can be disrupted, and the court has the facility for that person then to dial in by telephone so as not to disrupt the whole hearing. In respect of vulnerable clients, I think remote hearings are good for them because they can participate in the hearing without fear of abuse at court from another party. I accept that it may not be possible for a person suffering from domestic abuse to attend a hearing from home, for example, if they reside in the same home as the perpetrator, but I think thought can and should be given to how else that party can participate in the hearing for them to give their best evidence to the court. And lastly, from a selfish perspective, it saves a lot of time for advocates and professionals. I think I'm able to better plan my day. Once I know what time we have the listing, we're able to call other advocates and take instructions from clients, which allow other tasks of the day to be completed around this and allows me to better manage my day. So in summary, I think times have moved on and the justice system needs to move in the same direction so that we can better reflect the experiences of court users who are no longer so centrally located. And of course, there are always going to be cases where remote hearings are not appropriate, but this can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, for example, where there are contested issues.
Thank you very much, Forum.